Tonight on Q2, a big controversy over tiny homes.
Crime is big around here. So if you know, then address it by not doing this. This is crazy.
Plans for a homeless village in Billings have some neighbors concerned. Plus, party time in Bozeman. Bobcat fans line the streets as the college game day crew arrives.
Absolutely excited for game day. Bobcats are going to win by 1 million. You heard it here first.
And it's a trip back in time. The Cat Grizz game hasn't always been played in Bozeman or Missoula. We'll take you to the Copper Bowl in Butte.
From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Keagan Harsha. Well, our top story here at 10, big concerns over tiny homes. The Salvation Army's plans to build a village for the homeless in Billings has some worried about the impact on their neighborhood. Our David J. was at a very heated meeting tonight where emotions were high.
A tiny house village is planned for this piece of land across from North Park to take care of people who are homeless and provide some shelter on cold nights like this. Some have raised some questions, so the Salvation Army held a special meeting to talk with neighbors.
So if you look at Beloved Community Village in Denver, Colorado.
No. I mean on your site, Buster. You.
It took just minutes for a meeting Thursday night to turn tense.
Are we going to give them a proper foundation?
A group of about 25 residents voiced concerns about property values and crime, as the Salvation Army explained its motivation behind building a tiny village for the city's homeless right near North Park.
It's hugely beneficial to moving people into a better place.
Lieutenant Colin Pedersen says construction on the William Booth Village, named after the Salvation Army's founder, will start next spring with 7 cabins and a commons building. A phase 2 of the project will eventually add 21 more homes for a total of 28.
I've had people that it only took a week or two and they were able to move into something more permanent. And then I've had other people that we've worked with that have taken years because of, things in their life.
Similar tiny home villages already exist in many other cities, including this one in Bozeman.
28 is better than 9.
But many gathered here are adamant it's a bad idea.
Have you looked at other locations, say outside of Billings city limits?
Mayor Bill Cole was among those in attendance, and he too asked about crime.
Is there a mechanism to remove people if they are found to have committed crime?
But the Salvation Army says the village will likely help the problem, not magnify it.
This village model has a huge impact on reducing crime and improving the neighborhood.
The tiny home village generated some big controversy as the Salvation Army looks into a new approach to help address rising homelessness in Billings.
We are desiring to work with our neighbors. We want them to come in and give us input in terms of what would be beneficial to the neighborhood.
In Billings, David J., MTN News.
And this severe cold spell is definitely leaving many who are outside looking for someplace warm to stay tonight. With more on those dropping temperatures, here's Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh.
By tomorrow morning, wind chill values across eastern Montana and northern Wyoming will be mainly into the teens below zero. And what does that mean? It means that we normally have a protective layer of warmth around us. We lose a certain amount of heat through convection, but there's a protective layer of warmth that hangs around with no wind. So if the thermometer says 2 degrees, it feels like 2 degrees. But if you add in just 10 miles per hour of wind, suddenly that protective layer of warmth starts to get pushed away from us, and 2 degrees on the thermometer can feel like 15 degrees below zero. So make sure that you dress in layers. Make sure you think about pets in your travel plans. This isn't outrageously cold by Montana standards, but it's the coldest we've seen so far this season. Forecast is coming up.
Yellowstone National Park officials have identified the person whose foot was found floating in a hot spring last August. That foot, which was found in the Abyss Pool in the West Thumb Geyser Basin, belonged to Ilhan Rowe. Park officials say that 70-year-old man was from Los Angeles and somehow ended up in the 140-degree pool, but no foul play is suspected. No one has reported actually witnessing the incident. It's also unclear whether the rest of Rowe's body was ever found. Well, on the national political front tonight, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi is ending her historic run as Speaker of the House. Pelosi announced today she is stepping down from a leadership position within the Democratic Party. Pelosi was the first woman in U.S. history to ever serve as House Speaker. New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is now the favorite to take over as minority leader.
The dust has barely settled on last week's midterm elections, and already we're talking about 2024. Those races taking the spotlight this week as former President Donald Trump announces he is once again going to run for president. That's a decision that's being met with some mixed reactions by Montanans following the political conversation.
I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
The announcement was expected, but that didn't make it any less exciting for Aaron Flint.
We see a freedom fighter in Donald Trump, and we see a freedom fighter in Ron DeSantis.
You may recognize Flint's voice from the Montana Talks radio show.
We got to go to Trump DeSantis here.
A conservative talk radio show Flint hosts every morning.
Has anyone mentioned Trump DeSantis on the ticket in 2024?
And on Thursday morning, Flint and one of his regular guests, David Noble, weighed in on GOP odds in the 2024 election.
Everybody loves that. Of course, the reality is, that's never going to happen.
The Trump-DeSantis dynamic is a hot topic in the world of politics right now, as many are debating who will win the Republican nomination, along with the possibility of a party split.
I think Donald Trump obviously is the heavy favorite with the people. That's what I'm hearing right now, because he's already been there. He's already won the White House. Now, some people might say, yeah, but what about 2020? Well, what about since 2020?
I think Ron DeSantis is primarily the heir apparent for the Republican Party going into the 2024 presidential election.
For MSU Billings political science professor Paul Pope, Trump's announcement didn't drum up as much excitement.
I think Trump, given his personality, most likely that DeSantis is going to get the nomination. Trump may try to run as an independent or start a third party if he doesn't get the nomination, which I think is very likely.
Trump won Montana in both the 2016 and 2020 elections. In 2020, he carried the state with nearly 60% of the vote. Where Flint and Pope will agree, 2024 will give them both a lot to talk about.
That's what primaries are all about. People are going to choose who they think is the best candidate.
In Billings, Jackie Coffin, MTN News.
Well, Laurel is getting a Hollywood makeover this week as several famous actors are in town to shoot a new movie there. The film, called Blood for Dust, features actors Kit Harington from Game of Thrones and Josh Lucas from the popular show Yellowstone. The film is set in the 90s and it follows a down-on-his-luck road salesman who ends up on a dangerous path. The crew this week was out filming at the United Methodist Church in Laurel, and several local residents were asked to participate as extras in the movie. Even with all the big names, the crew has asked those residents to participate, and they say that's putting a spotlight on the community.
Like Billings, Laurel is just so tight-knitted. Even seeing people that you know who are also extras in this movie, I think it's going to make a huge impact on the Laurel community.
The movie will most likely premiere sometime in 2023, but exact details are still unknown. More shoots for that film are planned in the coming days right here in the Billings area. The 121st Brawl of the Wild now just 2 short days away, and the party is already underway in Bozeman. Big crowd gathered out there as the college game day bus arrived in Bozeman today. Fans were lining the streets to welcome that crew to town. The bus, which was led by the MSU rodeo team, started at the M before then heading to Main Street and then arriving on campus. And before the game kicks off, make sure to catch our special Big Sky Showdown. That's happening Friday night at 6. You can also catch it Saturday morning right before the game at 11 o'clock. The big game then kicks off at noon sharp right here on Q2. Well, Bozeman and Missoula typically play host to Montana's biggest sporting event, but it actually hasn't always been that way. For 21 years, the Cat Grizz game was played in Butte, and the game was known as the Copper Bowl. MTN's Jay Cohn takes us on a trip down memory lane.
In 1926, Butte was home to 70,000 people. The Depression had cut into the city's population, but the richest hill on earth was still Montana's financial and cultural center. The Copper Bowl Gridiron Classic was the brainchild of the Butte Chamber of Commerce. Students and fans would arrive by special trains. Both teams would stay at the Finland, the largest hotel in Montana. And a big parade through Uptown Butte became a yearly tradition.
The entire weekend was like New Year's Eve and St. Patrick's Day all rolled into one. Luetta Payne, Butte resident.
Here at Clark Park once stood the largest stadium in the state. It could seat up to 8,000 people. And that, at the time, was more than the entire population of the city of Bozeman. Sure enough, for the very first Copper Bowl in 1926, more than 8,500 fans crammed in to witness history.
Newspapers reported it as the biggest crowd ever assembled for a sports event in the Treasure State. Prior to kickoff, bands from both schools joined together for the national anthem and the state song. Streamers of Bobcat and Grizz colors were launched into the sky, much to the crowd's delight.
It was indeed a joyous way to kick off Montana's biggest football game of the year. Butte resident.
Included in Copper Bowl history, perhaps the very first taunting call. It happened in 1929. Jerry Ryan of Deer Lodge was flagged 15 yards for talking as he warmed up on the Grizzlies sideline. In 1932, when the Cats rallied in the fourth quarter to win, Grizz coach Bunny Oaks was furious.
We're so rotten, I think we ought to play our games in Denmark from now on. Bernard Bunny Oaks, Grizzly coach.
2 years later, Oaks would surprise the Cats, opening the game with his shock troops of reserve players. Those reserves pulled off 3 straight double lateral pass plays en route to a 32-0 Grizz shutout, the first of 8 scoreless years for the Cats. It was standing room only when the game moved to the new Butte High School field in 1939. Standout Jack Swarthout, a future head coach for the Grizz, would lead Montana in passing that season from his fullback position. And in 1947, a classic story of Cat-Grizz irony, when former Grizz halfback Barney Berger of Billings kicked the game-winning points for the Cats. The brawls in Butte came to an end in 1950, but the stories and the legends live on. Names like Bobcat greats Max Worthington, Bob Graham, and Ray Bazzetti, while Naseby Reinhardt, Bill Lazatich, and S.O. Naranchi etch their names in Grizzly lore. One of the most intriguing chapters in one of the country's most storied rivalries. In Butte, I'm Jay Cohn, reporting for MTN Sports.
Can't wait for kickoff. Well, still to come here on the MTN 10 o'clock news on Q2. From the grips of addiction, a mother turned author tells the story of her daughter's battle with the disease and the road to recovery. And later, a deeper dive tonight into the impacts that encrypted scanners have had on the media and its reporting as the Billings Police Department makes that change.